Hi and welcome to the summary video from our cognitive reframing mini workshop. So we introduced this skill by telling you that it obviously comes from cognitive behavioral therapy, but also giving you a practical example. For many of us, when we wake up in the morning and we go to the mirror, the first thing that we might say to ourselves is generally something which is quite negative. This is down to our natural negativity bias. But when we consider the skill of cognitive reframing, this allows us to catch those statements, to challenge those statements, and to change those statements to support ourselves. If you think about it for a moment, nobody will speak to you more than you'll speak to yourself. So our ability to be able to catch, challenge and change some of those statements that aren't supporting us is critically important. I also want you to think for a moment about this idea that our thoughts influence our feelings, which then influence our actions. And it doesn't always work in this sequence, but there is no doubt that both our thoughts and our feelings will impact our actions. And let me give you an example. If you woke up this morning and your plan was to go for a run, but you looked out the window and the weather maybe wasn't great, you might have said to yourself, it's too cold, I could just do that run later on. And chances are when we start to entertain those thoughts, the feelings that are produced are probably feelings that aren't very motivated to go and do that run. And as a result, the action generally is we might skip that run. Now that's just a basic example. But if we think about as we move through our day, the amount of times that we're maybe saying statements like that could be potentially stopping us pursuing things that we really want. So harnessing the skill of cognitive reframing can actually increase what we call our self-efficacy. And it can do this by helping us manage what we call our physiological and emotional states. So what I want you to do now is I want you to think of something that you might say to yourself on a regular basis, which is preventing you from moving forward in a certain area of your life. Examples could be if you have a health goal, you could be regularly telling yourself that maybe you're not able to achieve that goal without even considering maybe a strategy to be able to then overcome or achieve that goal. Or it might be in relation to your career. You might be telling yourself that you're not good enough for a certain role or you don't have skills yet for a certain role. And this could be preventing you even going for the interview process. Now that you've got something that you can essentially use as our example here, what I want you to think about is this spectrum. And on one end of the spectrum, we might call that sabotage. And on the other end of the spectrum, you might call that support. I want you now to place that statement somewhere along that spectrum. So are you being extremely critical of yourself and you're closer down here to sabotage? Or are you somewhere in the middle where it's not too self-deprecating, but you need to challenge it in order to help it be more supportive to you and your overall goal? And that's the next step on this process. I want you now to challenge that statement. So now that you've caught it, I want you to challenge it. How can you flip that statement to something which is more supportive for you? And now that you maybe have that in mind, I want you to change that statement. So you've gone through that process of catching maybe that internal dialogue which is holding you back. You've now moved to challenging that by maybe bringing in some facts around the situation, and now you're going to change that statement. So let's use our example around career progression. I might be telling myself that I don't have the skills for the next role. But by challenging that statement, I may uncover that I don't have the skills yet, but I have figured out a way to be able to develop those skills if I move into that role. So by changing the statement to something which sounds a bit more supportive, which, by the way, it could sound like I don't have the skills yet for that role, but I've identified them and I know how I will build them if I am successful in the interview process. All of a sudden, I'm supporting myself in the pursuit of that goal. I hope that you can take this framework around cognitive reframing, so the idea of catching, challenging and changing those statements in order to support you as you move forward in your goals. Thank you.